Hi there, this is Dr. Anna Maria Helt, herbalist and microbiologist here with Basmati.com, and my apologies, my sidekick Milo is not here today. But this isn't going to stop us from getting into our herb of the week. And so today I'm going to actually talk about willow, and I'm surprised I haven't talked about this yet. Salix is the botanical name, S-A-L-I-X, willow. And there are many, 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 many different species of willow. Everything from very large trees like the Whomping Willow in Harry Potter, but there really are big willows out there, to little small shrubs. And here is a twig from a weeping willow that lives just outside of my condo. And so they can look very different as well. But once you know willow, whether it's a tree or a shrub, you kind of get a sense of what its aspect looks like, what it looks like, and you'll know you're dealing with a willow, even though the leaf shape can vary greatly from this long pointy leaf. Sometimes they're much shorter and wider, and so it can be a sneaky species, changing its appearance. But again, once you get a good sense of what this genus looks like, you can spot a willow. And they're all over the place, along stream sides, rivers, ponds, marshy areas, you're going to find willow. It does like its feet in the water. And they hybridize, and so they interbreed the different species of willows. And so good luck if you're trying to identify a willow down to the precise species out in the wild, because it can really be difficult to do. But just know that more or less willows can be used interchangeably as medicine. You just have to do a quick check that I'll come to in a moment to see if it's going to be good medicine. And also willows make great magic wands. If you get a thicker branch than this, they're nice and straight for you Harry Potter fans. And actually willow has a lot of really interesting folklore around it. And one of the characteristics of willow is that it grows like crazy. It can grow really quickly, and in fact, if you plant, or if you just stick a twig of willow that you've broken off or cut off from the tree in the ground, it will grow. Even if you put it in the ground upside down, it may still grow. And so a friend of mine actually built a really beautiful willow fence around her house from the tons of willow growing on her property, and her fence started growing. And so at the top of the fence, there are all these branches and leaves sticking out. So it's kind of a neat magical fence, but maybe not everybody's cup of tea. And so because of this strong regrowth and bouncing back in many parts of the world, willow actually symbolizes immortality and renewal and vitality. And it also symbolizes strength, because willow can bend. It can bend down to the ground without breaking. It will bounce back. It's not brittle. So it's very strong in that regard. And it symbolizes strength. So if you feel like you're easily knocked down by life and you need an ally for support, go find a willow to sit under and hang out with, and maybe collect some willow leaves and make a little amulet or something that you can carry around with you, or even put them in your wallet, just to set that intention of learning how to kind of bend with the crap that life will often throw at you, at us, at all of us. And so on to the medicinal uses. Many of you are probably familiar with them. Willow is used and has been forever as a pain reliever. And in fact, it has aspirin precursors in it. And so aspirin is basically an anti-inflammatory. And so for all of the various things you would use aspirin for, you can use willow for. And it's especially useful for painful joints and what they would call rheumatism in old-fashioned speak. Willow is, but you could also use it for headaches, especially tension headaches where there's tenderness kind of on the back of the neck, tension on the back of the neck. You can use willow for that. You can use willow even for migraines, but there are some stronger herbs out there that might be better than willow for migraines, but you can give it a go if it's what you happen to have around. And the part that you use as medicine for willow is actually the bark, the inner bark. And so I will not harvest bark from a tree. Most herbalists at this point will not go up to the tree and gouge out the bark. And so instead you find twigs and branches that you can take the bark from. And if it's a really skinny twig, you don't even really need to peel the bark. with your knife or your peeler, however you're doing that, you can just chop up that little twig. And in fact, people used to, and still do, just chew the twig itself for pain relief. But so I use small twigs, and I do use a knife to peel off the bark. I don't try to separate the inner and the outer bark from those little twigs because it's not necessary. That it's fine if you're getting the medicine from the twigs. And so willow has also been used in the student clinic where I trained for things like fibromyalgia. Only there you're using pretty big doses, like an ounce of the dried bark simmered for a while in a pot. That's a dose. Or 15 to 30 drops of a liquid extract. That's a very high dose of willow. And the thing with willow is it's similar to aspirin that's not buffered in that it can upset your stomach. In fact, some people that are really sensitive may even vomit after they drink willow tea or take willow extract. And an herb you can mix it with to buffer it is a small amount of licorice. And, mostly willow, but maybe a couple drops of licorice if you're doing, say, 10 drops of willow to help buffer it. And if you're worried about licorice and the blood pressure effects it can have, get DGL licorice. That will also work as a buffer. I've never had a problem with licorice, by the way, and I know I'm going on a tangent here. I use it at very low doses in formulas for clients who do not have high blood pressure, and there's never been a problem. But licorice does in high amounts with frequent usage have the potential to cause electrolyte imbalances and raise your blood pressure. But if you use DGL licorice for your aspirin buffer, your willow buffer, then that's not so much of an issue. And you'll still get that soothing aspect of the licorice. And it'll make the willow taste a little bit better if you don't like that bitter flavor of willow. Now, I alluded to how to know whether the willow growing near you is good medicine. And what you can do is just scrape off a little bit of the brown bark from a twig and make sure, I'm going to sneeze 1 second. Oh, goodness, pardon me. All right, so usually it comes in twos. And then make sure you can taste a little bit of that green inner bark, and it should be bitter tasting, and it should be astringent on your tongue, which means there should be a bit of a drying feeling there. And you'll learn what it should taste like the more you use willow. But if it's not very bitter and not giving you the kind of that drying, astringent feeling on your tongue, then that particular willow might not be the strongest medicine. So this is called organoleptic testing. Our body, our senses are actually way more sensitive than a machine when it comes to analyzing what's in our medicine and knowing if it's good medicine. And so, what else do I want to talk about? Oh, so also because it has aspirin-related compounds in it, you do not want to use willow in children that have a fever. And I wouldn't even use it in, say, young teens or preteens with a fever because of Rye syndrome, which is a scary biochemical interaction that can happen in young people who have a viral infection. There's a bad interaction that can happen with the chemistry of aspirin, and that holds for any herb that has aspirin precursors in it as well, whether we're talking about willow or meadowsweet or black cohosh, things like that that have aspirin type chemistry in them. You want to avoid in young children with a fever. And the reason I'm talking about a fever is because often when we have a viral infection, we'll have a fever. So if you know your kid has a viral infection or they have a fever, you're not going to use willow, just to be clear on that. Now, willow is also going to be a mild blood thinner. And so you could use it for all of the reasons you would use a blood thinner. For instance, doctors will often have women that are trying to conceive on a blood thinner like baby aspirin to make sure they have good healthy blood flow going to the uterus rather than clotty blood that can cause problems. And, for people that need serious blood thinners where your doctor's putting you on Coumadin or warfarin, don't know that willow will cut it. So don't stop your blood thinning medication to go on willow. But for people that need a mild blood thinner, who need better circulation, willow can be great. And in fact, one of my teachers, my main teacher, in fact, talked about using willow in people who have really sluggish blood flow from eating a high-fat diet. And so willow can be really helpful there, where there are a lot of lipids floating around in the bloodstream, clogging things up. And so with that, I think I will wrap it up. Wonderful herb, wonderful tree and shrub, lots of really cool folklore and legends around it that you could geek out on and look up. And until next time, good health to you.